My name is Clara Whitman, and I'm 34 years old. I live in Seattle, work as a senior architect at one of the city's top urban design firms, and I've built my life on precision, blueprints, timelines, budgets. I'm the kind of person who triple checks her calendar and files taxes early. So you can imagine my confusion when I opened a thick envelope from a mortgage company last fall, addressed to me. The paperwork inside listed me as the borrower of a $520,000 mortgage loan for a sleek condo in downtown Seattle. The monthly payments? $3,200. The address? A luxury high-rise I had never even visited, let alone agreed to buy. At first, I thought it had to be some sort of scam, a clerical error. But then I saw the signature, my signature. Or at least, something that looked a lot like it. I sat on my kitchen floor, surrounded by pages of terms and disclosures, my pulse climbing with every line I read. This wasn't junk mail. This was a legally binding mortgage, processed and approved. In my name. Before I could even pick up the phone to call the mortgage company, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Oh, good, you got the paperwork," she said breezily, like she'd just sent me a birthday card. "We wanted it to be a surprise, but I guess the mail came early." "Wait, what?" I managed. "The condo, for Ryan. He moves in next week. It's really quite perfect for him. Close to Capitol Hill, beautiful views, pet-friendly." I was silent. Then I said, "Mom, what are you talking about? Why am I the one on the mortgage?" "Well, your father and I had to put it under your name. Ryan's credit isn't ideal, and you make more than enough to qualify. It's a win-win." I felt a cold wave of nausea rise in my chest. "You applied for a mortgage in my name without telling me?" "Don't be so dramatic, Clara. You know how hard it is for Ryan right now. You're in a great place financially. And we thought, well, family helps family." That phrase again. Family helps family. I'd heard it 1,000 times over the years, every time they wanted me to fix one of Ryan's problems with my money. But this was something else entirely. This was theft. Fraud. I told her I had to go and hung up before I screamed. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced my apartment, reading through the documents over and over again. My signature had been forged. My financial details had been used. Somehow my parents had gotten access to just enough of my past tax returns and pay stubs to put together a complete loan application. And it had worked. And the worst part? They truly believed I'd just go along with it. They'd already made the decision. Ryan was getting a new condo, and I was paying for it, whether I liked it or not. I didn't know it then, but that envelope marked the beginning of the darkest chapter of my life. A chapter filled with betrayal, legal battles, and the painful realization that sometimes the people who raised you are the very ones you need to protect yourself from. If you've ever been caught between loyalty to family and loyalty to yourself, you'll want to stick around for the rest of this story. And if this resonates with something you've been through, hit that like button and consider subscribing. These stories matter. Yours does too. To understand how my family got to the point of forging my name on a mortgage, you need to understand the Whitmans. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, Quarry Hill, population under 10,000. My parents, Joanne and Dennis Whitman, were the type of people everyone thought were decent and respectable. Dad ran a hardware store that had been in our family for 2 generations. Mom worked part-time at the public library and full-time on her reputation as a pillar of the community. From the outside, we looked like the classic American family. But on the inside, things were always off. I was the eldest by 5 years. When I was born, my parents were young and still struggling. By the time my brother Ryan came along, they had found some stability. And with that came a strange shift in how they treated us. I wasn't resentful at first. I didn't even notice it, not consciously. But it became undeniable over time. If I got an A, my dad would ask, "Why not an A plus?" If Ryan got a B, the house would light up with praise. "Look at our smart boy." If I broke a cup while doing dishes, I'd get a lecture about responsibility. If Ryan flooded the bathroom with a foam cannon he made from garden hose parts, it was creative. Birthdays were the clearest indicator. For my 16th, I got a secondhand bike with a missing gear. For Ryan's 16th, a used but still shiny Toyota Corolla parked in the driveway with a red bow. I was the mature one, the reliable one, and that meant I was the one who didn't need things to feel special. That was the unspoken rule. I could be neglected because I could handle it. I don't remember the first time I heard the phrase, Ryan just needs more support, but it became a family mantra. Ryan failed his first year of college. He's finding his path. Ryan quit his job after 2 weeks. The environment wasn't a good fit. Ryan ran up $3,000 in credit card debt buying electronics. He's under a lot of pressure. Meanwhile, I started working part-time at 15, stacking shelves at the local grocery store to save for college. My parents couldn't afford to help much, for me that is. I earned a partial scholarship to Oregon State University and took out loans to cover the rest. I worked through every semester, late nights drafting models, early mornings selling coffee, sometimes both in the same day. When I graduated, I didn't even get a family dinner. Ryan's high school graduation? They rented out the lodge at the golf course and invited half the town. Even back then, I didn't see myself as the victim. I told myself I was just more low maintenance, that I didn't need as much. But deep down, it left scars, the kind that teach you to equate love with performance, and to hide disappointment because you're afraid of seeming ungrateful. After college, I moved to Portland for a junior architect position, and later relocated to Seattle. I spent my 20s in small apartments with noisy neighbors, sketching blueprints late into the night, and carefully building my portfolio. I paid off my student loans by 31. I was proud of the independence I'd built. So proud, in fact, I wanted to believe my family was proud of me too. But the truth? They weren't proud. They were entitled. Every promotion I got, every raise or article I published wasn't met with congratulations. It was met with a new expectation. Now that you're doing well, it's time to give back to the family. And by give back, they meant help Ryan. Always Ryan. When Ryan's car broke down last year, my mom called. Not a mechanic, me. You make good money, sweetie. He just needs a little help getting back on his feet. When Ryan wanted to try real estate, but couldn't afford the license course, my dad called. Maybe you could gift it to him. As a big sister thing. I said yes more times than I want to admit. Not because I believed it was right, but because I didn't want to be the selfish one. The one who forgot where she came from. I thought if I kept helping, maybe I'd finally earn their respect, their appreciation. Maybe they'd finally stop treating me like a tool and start treating me like their daughter. But now, seeing my name on that fraudulent mortgage, it was the moment I realized I was never a daughter to them. I was a resource, a walking, breathing solution to every one of Ryan's failures. And I was done. In my 20s, while Ryan was hopping from one dream to another, YouTuber, podcaster, Twitch streamer, real estate visionary, I was living on instant oatmeal and black coffee in a shared basement apartment, trying to make a name for myself as a junior designer. I remember the exact moment I signed my first solo project. It was a community library expansion in Tacoma. Nothing glamorous, but mine. I stayed up all night working on the renderings, then took a nap in my car before the client meeting. When the project got approved, my supervisor clapped me on the back and said, "This is your start, Whitman." I called my parents, breathless with pride. My mom's response? "That's lovely, dear. Speaking of buildings, did you know Ryan's landlord raised his rent again?" That was the rhythm. Every personal win was immediately paired with Ryan's latest struggle. I got promoted? Ryan had lost another job. I landed a speaking spot at a regional architecture expo. Ryan had anxiety and needed a break. My raises, my accolades, my milestones, none of it was ever fully mine, not to them. It was all weighed against what Ryan didn't have. Still, I kept helping. I sent Ryan money for rent, twice. I paid off his credit card once because Mom said his interest rate was crushing his spirit. I covered his copay when he wanted to try therapy, which he quit after 2 sessions because the therapist didn't get him. Each time I told myself it was the last, that I was drawing the line. But each time my parents came at me with just the right guilt-laced language. "You're doing well. Ryan's trying. He just needs one more chance." I became the safety net they never had to ask permission to use. Family gatherings became increasingly unbearable. I'd fly down for Christmas and sit through hours of dinner conversation that revolved around Ryan, his job search, his newest idea, his latest crisis. Whenever I tried to talk about my work or the building I was designing in South Lake Union, the topic would quietly shift. One Thanksgiving, I mentioned my firm had offered me a team lead role. My dad leaned back in his chair, fork halfway to his mouth. "That's great. Means you've got some extra bandwidth. Ryan was thinking of going back to school. Maybe you could help cover some classes?" I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. "I've got my own financial goals," I said carefully. My mother waved her hand. "Sweetheart, you've always been so structured. But life isn't always about numbers and budgets. Sometimes it's about heart." Heart. That's what they called it when they wanted me to clean up Ryan's messes. Structure. That was my curse. My parents viewed my discipline, my stability, as a sign that I could afford to lose pieces of myself and still stay standing. When I turned 30, I bought my own condo in a quieter corner of Seattle. One bedroom, minimal but filled with light, designed by the same firm where I now led a team. That condo wasn't just shelter. It was proof. Proof that I could build something on my own, without shortcuts, without favors. I didn't invite my family to the housewarming. It wasn't an intentional snub. I just didn't have the emotional space for another conversation about how cold I'd become, or how I owed Ryan for being the big sister with everything. They didn't call to congratulate me. The silence hurt more than I expected. But still, I thought I could just keep a distance, send a gift card on birthdays, keep the conversations light, pretend the dynamic was tolerable, that I could outgrow the sting of never being enough unless I was giving something. Until that envelope showed up, until they forged my signature. That single act didn't just cross a boundary, it obliterated it. There was no more gray area. This wasn't misguided parenting. It was a deliberate choice. A belief so deep-rooted it had turned criminal, that my success wasn't mine but theirs to allocate. Looking back, I can't say I was surprised. Not completely. I think some part of me had always known it would come to this. The invitation came through a text from my mother, 2 days after I confronted her over the phone. "Come for dinner Wednesday, just the four of us. Let's talk this through like a family." No apology, no explanation. Just that cool, passive-aggressive tone she had perfected over decades. I stared at the message for 10 full minutes before replying, "Fine, 6 p.m. I didn't go out of obligation. I went because I needed to look them in the eye. I needed to hear them say it. I needed to know if the people who raised me, who told bedtime stories, who packed my school lunches, were really capable of something so violating. The house I grew up in hadn't changed. Same beige siding, same patchy lawn, same wind chimes that never stopped clinking. But stepping inside felt like entering enemy territory. My chest tightened the moment I crossed the threshold. Ryan's car, a new Subaru, was already parked in the driveway. I remembered hearing from a cousin that Dad had helped him with a lease. Of course he had. Inside, the table was set like it was Thanksgiving. Candlelight, cloth napkins, wine glasses. My mother appeared from the kitchen with a forced smile. "There she is. You look tired, Clara. Are you sleeping?" "Cut the small talk," I said, hanging my coat. "Let's get to it." We sat in the living room, facing each other like opponents in some twisted family tribunal. My father in his recliner, arms crossed. My mother on the sofa, legs primly crossed at the ankle. Ryan lounged on the armrest like he had nothing to worry about. I took the chair directly across from them, spine straight, heart pounding. "Let's start with the documents," I said. "Why is my name on a mortgage for a condo I never saw, never agreed to, and never signed for?" My father cleared his throat like he was about to give a business pitch. "It's a starter property. Great investment. Walkable neighborhood. And with your credit and income, it made perfect sense." "Perfect sense for who?" I snapped. "For all of us," my mother said smoothly. "Ryan needs a stable place. He's finally ready to settle down. This could be a turning point in his life." "You could have asked," I said. "And what would you have said?" Ryan cut in, arms folded. "You never help me unless you're guilted into it." "Maybe that's because you expect help like it's your birthright." My father raised a hand, silencing us both. "Clara, your name was on those papers because we made a decision. A family decision. You're doing well. Ryan isn't. It's simple. No, I said firmly. It's fraud. My mother's smile dropped. Don't use that word. It's so ugly. Ugly like forging my signature. Ugly like submitting a loan application using my private financial records without permission? Your old tax returns were still in the office, my father said. We figured if we did the paperwork, you'd come around. So you thought stealing my identity would just make me change my mind? No one stole anything, my mother insisted. We're not strangers. We're your parents. Ryan is your brother. That doesn't make it legal. That doesn't make it right. Ryan shrugged. It's not like you're poor. You have your own condo. You just got promoted. This would barely affect you. It would completely derail my financial future, I shot back. And more importantly, it's not your decision. You don't get to play God with my credit, my signature, my autonomy. There was a pause. Then the real blow came. Well, my father said coldly, the condo is already purchased. Ryan moves in on Friday. The deal's done. I stared at him, disbelief and fury rising in equal measure. So this was never a conversation. This was a presentation, a reveal. You're overreacting, my mother hissed. If you walk out now, you're turning your back on your family. I stood. My voice didn't shake. If being in this family means accepting fraud, silence, and emotional blackmail, then maybe I don't want to be part of it. My mother stood too, gripping my arm hard. You walk out, Clara, and you're on your own. Forever. I yanked my arm free. I've been on my own since I was 15. I just didn't know it. And I walked out, into the cold, into the dark, into something I couldn't name yet. But it sure as hell wasn't weakness. The night I walked out of that house, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The real war hadn't even begun. The next morning, I called my firm and took a personal day. I spent the entire afternoon on the phone with the mortgage company's fraud department. A calm-voiced woman named Diane, guiding me through the initial steps, submitting an affidavit, freezing my credit, filing a preliminary fraud alert with the FTC. That night, I called my friend Naomi, a corporate attorney who I'd known since college. Clara, this isn't just a family dispute, she said, after I explained everything. This is criminal fraud. They used your identity without consent. You need legal representation now. She referred me to a firm in Seattle that specialized in financial abuse and identity theft. I had a consultation booked within 48 hours. But while I was pulling legal threads together, my family had already gone on the offensive. It started with the phone calls, dozens, from numbers I didn't recognize. My mother left voicemail saying I was overreacting and tearing the family apart. My father sent me a long email quoting Bible verses about duty and sacrifice. Then came Ryan. He posted a video on Instagram, shot from the living room of the condo, my condo, legally speaking. In it, he looked devastated. I never asked for this. I just wanted a chance. My sister, Clara, who has everything, is trying to take it all away from me. I don't know why she hates me so much. The comments flooded in. How can your own blood do that to you? She sounds cold AF. Stay strong, bro. Then he launched a GoFundMe page titled, Abandoned by My Sister. Help me keep my home. By the end of the week, he'd raised $8,400 from strangers and from people in my extended family who never even called to ask my side. My boss, Mr. Keller, called me into his office after someone from my mother's book club showed up at the firm's reception desk asking if Clara had gotten help for her breakdown yet. I nearly choked. She what? He waved a hand. Don't worry, security handled it. But this situation, whatever it is escalating. If you need time off, take it. Officially. We'll support you, but get ahead of it. That night, I turned off my phone, deleted Instagram, disabled Facebook. Silence never felt so necessary. But the silence didn't last. A week later, while going over my fraud paperwork with the legal team, I was handed a heavy manila envelope delivered to my apartment that morning. It was stamped, Whitman v. Whitman. I flipped it open. Pages. Dozens of them. A formal lawsuit, filed by my parents, suing me for breach of verbal contract, family commitment, and, my favorite, unjust abandonment of financial responsibility. The amount? $520,000, the full value of the condo. My hands trembled, my jaw clenched, my entire body went still. They had actually done it. They'd sued me. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was warfare, legal, strategic, intentional, and designed to ruin me financially, emotionally, and publicly. I called the law firm that Naomi recommended and scheduled an emergency meeting. The attorney assigned to my case, Elena Ruiz, was sharp-eyed, calm, and didn't flinch when I told her the situation. After reviewing the lawsuit, she said, "This is nonsense. A judge will laugh this out of court, but that doesn't mean it won't cost you." Cost me how? In time, in energy, in money. You'll need to respond, file motions, appear in court. Even if we win, which we likely will, it could take months and thousands in fees. And Clara, you need to start thinking about boundaries, legally enforced ones. She meant a restraining order against my parents, against my brother. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just defending my credit. I was defending my life. Because this wasn't just a mortgage, it was a message. You don't get to walk away from us. We'll make sure you pay. After that lawsuit hit my doorstep, I couldn't sleep for 3 days. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible outcome. Losing the case, losing my job, losing what little family I had left. I could feel the anxiety crawling up my spine like cold water, soaking everything I thought I'd secured. My career, my finances, my identity. I wasn't scared of court. I was scared of what this said about who my parents really were. But I didn't have the luxury of breaking down. Elena, my attorney, moved fast. "First," she said, "we gather everything. Emails, text messages, voicemail recordings, documents, anything that shows a pattern of manipulation or proves you never agreed to this mortgage." I spent hours combing through years of communication with my family. Old emails where my mom suggested I pay Ryan's rent. Texts from my dad asking me to cover just this one thing. Voicemails that went from sweet to guilt-tripping in a single breath. But the real jackpot? A thread of messages between my parents, accidentally CC'd to my work email months ago, where my father had written, "She's never going to agree if we ask outright. Let's just push it through and present it as done. She's always too independent for her own good." And my mother had responded, "Exactly. Once Ryan's moved in, what's she going to do? Evict her own brother?" I stared at those lines like they were from strangers. This wasn't a miscommunication. It was premeditated. With Elena's help, we compiled a full timeline. The mortgage documents with forged signatures, financial records showing they used my tax filings, communications proving I had no knowledge or consent, and the psychological pattern, years of pressure, guilt, and financial entitlement. We also sent a formal fraud report to the mortgage company, along with an affidavit from me and the evidence package. They launched their own internal investigation, and that's when the pressure started ramping up again. My father left me a voicemail that still plays in my head sometimes. "This is your last chance, Clara. Withdraw your accusations, take responsibility, or we'll make sure the court hears every promise you ever made to this family. Don't test us." My mother showed up unannounced at my building, pounding on the glass door until security asked her to leave. Ryan posted a second video, crying into the camera while talking about being stabbed in the back by the one person I thought loved me. He even edited fake screenshots of our texts to make it look like I had promised to buy him a house. It was surreal, like watching someone edit your life and hand it to the world with your name on it. Friends I hadn't heard from in years messaged me saying, "Is it true?" Or worse, "Why don't you just help him? You can afford it." Even my therapist at the time suggested I consider the emotional cost of winning. I never went back after that, because this wasn't about winning. This was about surviving. By the third week, I had lost nearly 12 pounds. I was skipping meals, missing meetings, and waking up at 3 a.m. convinced someone was coming after me. One night, I found myself standing in my kitchen holding a check I'd written for legal fees. wondering if I should just pay the damn mortgage and disappear. But then I remembered that email. She's always too independent for her own good. That wasn't just an insult. That was the reason I had to fight. Because if I didn't, they'd own me, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, in every way that mattered. And I had worked too damn hard to build this life. That night, I wrote a message to Elena. I want to fight all the way, no settlement, no negotiation. I'm ready. Her reply came 10 minutes later. Then let's tear this thing apart, brick by brick. The King County Courthouse was one of those stone gray buildings that seemed designed to make you feel small. Cold walls, tall ceilings, echoes that made your footsteps sound like judgments. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my sharpest navy pantsuit, hair pinned tight. Elena met me at the steps, clipboard in hand and eyes full of calm fire. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "But I'm here." "That's enough." Inside courtroom 3C, the walls were wood-paneled, the air too still. On the left side of the room sat my parents and Ryan, dressed like they were attending church rather than court. My mother clutched a pale blue handkerchief like she was waiting for a cue to cry. Ryan refused to look at me. Their lawyer, Mr. Robert Hale, was one of those silver-haired men who oozed smug confidence and billable hours. He barely glanced my way. When the clerk called Whitman v. Whitman, my legs tensed under the table. The judge, Honorable Elizabeth Monroe, looked to be in her early 60s. No-nonsense glasses. A face lined not by age, but by years of tolerating nonsense. "We're here today on a motion to dismiss, filed by the defendant, Ms. Clara Whitman," she began, scanning the file. "Ms. Ruiz, you may proceed." Elena stood, voice calm but cutting. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's case is not only legally unsupported, it is built on fraud. We've submitted documented evidence that the mortgage in question was taken out without Ms. Whitman's consent, with a forged signature, and personal financial data accessed without authorization." Judge Monroe raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious allegation." "It is, Your Honor. We have the supporting emails, texts, and mortgage documents, all of which show Ms. Whitman never agreed to take on this debt. The plaintiffs have filed a baseless suit in retaliation for being reported for mortgage fraud." Elena slid a binder across the table. The judge flipped through it. "This is the communication between the plaintiffs, discussing how to push the mortgage through and present it as a done deal?" "Yes, Your Honor." She nodded slowly, then turned to Hale. "Mr. Hale, your response?" He stood, clasped his hands like a pastor, and said, "Your Honor, this is a case of misunderstood intentions within a close-knit family. The Whitmans have always operated with shared responsibilities. Ms. Whitman had expressed in the past a willingness to help her brother Ryan secure housing. Her parents, acting in what they believed to be good faith, proceeded with the mortgage under that understanding." The judge didn't blink. "Are you claiming verbal agreement as the legal foundation for placing a $520,000 mortgage in her name?" "In essence, yes. With a forged signature." He hesitated. "With a signature added by her mother, who believed she had implied authority. That's not how signatures work in contract law, Mr. Hale." He pivoted. "Your Honor, this case is about family obligations, not corporate transactions. Surely we must consider the emotional context." "No, Mr. Hale," she cut in. "This is a court of law, not a family counseling session. Continue." My parents were then called to testify. My father went first, speaking with his usual authoritarian warmth. "We thought Clara would understand. We raised her with strong values. We never imagined she'd turn on us over a house." "Did you ask her permission?" the judge pressed. He paused. "Not directly, no." "Did she give written or verbal consent?" "No. But, thank you. That's all." Then it was my mother's turn. She dabbed at her dry eyes, voice trembling. "She's always been so independent. We just wanted to help Ryan. She always made it clear she was the strong one. We thought she'd forgive us. And finally, Ryan. He played the victim beautifully. I didn't know she'd be this angry. I just wanted a chance. Clara always made me feel like a burden. I never asked her for anything. Well, not much. But this time I thought maybe she'd come through. When it was my turn, I stood tall. I never gave consent. I never signed those documents. I worked for everything I have, and I will not be punished for refusing to be financially exploited by the people who were supposed to protect me. Elena asked me, "Has this ever happened before?" I nodded. Yes, small things. They co-signed credit cards in my name, opened store accounts when I was in college, filed taxes without asking me, and every time I raised a concern, I was told I was overreacting or forgetting where I came from. The judge looked at me, then at the documents, then at my parents. Her voice was calm, but final. "I'll issue my ruling within 10 days, but I want to make one thing clear. Even family cannot override consent, legality, and identity protection. This is not a gray area. Court is adjourned." And 9 days after the hearing, I was halfway through a project meeting when my phone buzzed. Text from Elena. "Ruling is in. Call me when you can." My stomach flipped. I excused myself, slipped into the empty stairwell, and hit call with trembling fingers. She picked up on the first ring. "Elena?" She didn't waste a second. "The judge dismissed the case with prejudice. She also sanctioned your parents and their attorney for filing a frivolous lawsuit." I leaned against the cool concrete wall, legs weak. "Wait, sanctioned?" "Yes, they're being ordered to pay part of your legal fees, $15,000 of it. Not everything, but it helps." I let out a laugh that came out more like a sob. Elena continued, voice firm but kind. "And there's more. The judge also issued a temporary restraining order. 90 days. They're not allowed to contact you directly. Any contact must go through legal channels." A tear slid down my cheek before I even realized I was crying. Not because I was sad, because finally someone had believed me. "I don't even know what to say," I whispered. "Say this," Elena replied. "You stood your ground, and the court saw the truth." The legal decision was a private win, but within hours, it became very public. That afternoon, someone at the courthouse, maybe a clerk, maybe someone in the legal community, leaked the ruling to the press. By evening, the Seattle Daily ran a headline that spread like wildfire. "Judge rules against parents who forge daughter's mortgage. Consent still matters, even in families." My name wasn't in the headline, but it was in the body of the article. So were parts of the transcript. So were they. By morning, my inbox was flooded. Some emails were from reporters, some from people I hadn't heard from in years, former high school classmates, distant cousins, ex-coworkers. Some were supportive, some were venomous. Aunt Dina wrote, "I can't believe you took this to court. Family is family. You'll regret this." Cousin Travis messaged, "Didn't believe your side until I read the judgment. You deserved better. Sorry I didn't speak up earlier." One email stood out. Subject: "I'm proud of you." It was from Uncle Victor, my father's estranged older brother, whom I hadn't seen since I was 12. "Clara, what they did to you. They did to me in a different way years ago. That's why I left. You didn't just win a case. You broke a cycle. I'm here, if you ever want to talk." I stared at that email for a long time. It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel entirely alone. Ryan, of course, reacted exactly how I expected. He posted a video at 2:13 a.m., slurring through tears. "I lost everything. The condo, my family, my dignity. All because my sister couldn't forgive one mistake, one act of love. She's cold, she's corporate, she's heartless. But hey, at least she got to win." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The world saw through him now. The donations to his GoFundMe dried up overnight. The fake screenshots he had posted were exposed in online forums. Even his most devoted defenders started quietly deleting their comments. The restraining order meant my mother couldn't call, but she tried to get around it with emails from anonymous accounts. The tone shifted from self-pity to rage to guilt. "We only wanted what's best. You've destroyed us. One day you'll be the one needing us, and we won't be there." But here's the thing. For the first time in my life, I didn't want them there. They weren't my safety net. They were the trap disguised as one. And now I had proof. Legal, public, unshakable. The ruling also included instructions for the mortgage company. They were to be notified of the court's findings. Elena sent the documentation that afternoon. 3 weeks later, I received official confirmation that my name had been removed from the loan and the deed. My credit report would be updated. The fraud would no longer haunt my financial future. The house? It was no longer mine. It never had been. Let them figure it out. Let them finally, for once, take care of themselves. The weeks after the ruling felt strangely quiet. No more voicemails from my mother. No more 3 a.m. smear posts from Ryan. No more staged family interventions disguised as loving concern. The silence was unfamiliar, not quite peaceful, just empty. I had won, legally, publicly, undeniably. But winning didn't feel like I'd imagined it would. I wasn't elated. I was exhausted. My finances were a mess. The $15,000 reimbursement from the court helped, but my legal bills had ballooned past $27,000. My emergency savings were gone. I'd maxed out one credit card to cover fees and canceled a long-awaited trip to Kyoto. I'd been saving for over a year. And emotionally, I felt like I was standing on a scorched foundation, surveying what was left of my life. Elena called to check in after the dust settled. "You doing okay?" I paused. "Honestly, I don't even know what okay means anymore." She nodded sympathetically through the phone. "That's normal. You're grieving, Clara. Not just the family you had, but the fantasy of the family you wished you had." I knew she was right. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that this version of my parents had always been there. I just hadn't seen them clearly before. I started therapy again, this time with someone new, someone who didn't talk about reconciliation, but about repairing internal boundaries. Dr. Lena Martinez specialized in financial abuse and intergenerational trauma. In one of our first sessions, she said something that stuck with me. Financial abuse is a form of identity theft, not just of your credit, but of your worth. We worked through the guilt, the anger, the moments where I felt like I had to apologize for simply protecting myself. We named the pattern. We traced it back. We unhooked me from it, piece by piece. Outside of therapy, I started rebuilding the life I'd put on pause. I created a new budget, started contributing back to my 401k, enrolled in an identity protection service, got a new credit monitoring system, and even froze my credit temporarily, just in case. I also began saying yes again. Yes to coffee with coworkers. Yes to dinner with Naomi and her fiancé. Yes to long walks without my phone. To sleep without checking email. To weekends that weren't filled with legal paperwork and dread. The people who'd stayed through it all, like Naomi, my boss Mr. Keller, my friend from college named Elise, they showed up for me in small but powerful ways. An extra coffee at my desk, a handwritten card, a "you didn't deserve any of that" text at midnight. And then there was Uncle Victor. After that email he sent, we began exchanging letters. Yes, actual physical letters. He lived 2 hours away, in a quiet lakeside town, and had spent decades estranged from the family. "I got tired of being the family bank," he wrote. "I left before they could ruin me. You did what I couldn't, Clara. You stayed, stood up, and won." We met in person that spring. I brought him a potted orchid. He brought me an old photo of my dad as a teenager, unsmiling, holding a report card like it was a bomb about to go off. "He learned control young," Victor said quietly, "and he passed it on in the only way he knew how." Victor wasn't offering excuses, just context. And in that context, I found something I hadn't had in months: relief. It wasn't all bad news. A few months after the trial, I got promoted at work, design team director, with a salary that allowed me to start rebuilding faster than I thought possible. I moved into a new apartment, a sun-drenched 2-bedroom overlooking Green Lake. It had nothing to do with revenge. It was about space, growth, light. I turned the second room into an office/guest room, and I filled it with the kind of things no one ever forged or claimed. My own blueprints, my own choices, my own quiet joy. About 8 months after the court ruling, I joined an online support group for adult survivors of family financial abuse. I didn't say much at first, just listened. But eventually, I began to share. Carefully, then openly. And one night, a message came in from a young woman named Rachel, 25, in Portland. Her parents had taken out a car loan in her name. She didn't know what to do. I met her for coffee. I listened to her story. I gave her Elena's contact. I told her everything I'd learned the hard way. When we left the cafe, she hugged me. "I thought I was crazy," she whispered. "But now, I think I'm just done being used." I smiled. So was I. 1 year after the court dismissed the case, I stood in my new kitchen pouring coffee into a mug that read, "My boundaries are not negotiable." It was a joke gift from Elise, but some mornings I clutched it like a mantra. There was still grief. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. Grief not just for what I lost, but for what never existed. The fantasy of a supportive family, the imaginary version of parents who protected rather than controlled, the dream of a brother who saw me as a sibling, not a wallet. But there was also something else, quiet. Not the silence of estrangement, but the peace of no longer being chased. No more hidden contracts. No more emotional ransom notes disguised as phone calls. No more being told that love means sacrifice, and only mine, never theirs. People still ask, sometimes gently, sometimes not. "Do you think you'll ever speak to them again?" And I always give the same answer. I don't think they ever spoke to me. Not really. They spoke to what they thought I owed them. They never once asked what I needed. That's not family. That's extraction. And I've stopped being a resource. I've become something else. Someone else. Stronger. Clearer. Freer. I still see Dr. Martinez. She helps me manage the residual trauma, like the way I still flinch when I get mail from financial institutions, or how I instinctively over-explain when I say no. But we also celebrate milestones, like the first time I booked a vacation without guilt, or the day I reactivated my Instagram. Not to perform, but to post a single photo of my desk and a caption that simply said, "Peace looks like this." I got over 400 messages, but the one that stayed with me was from a stranger. "Your story gave me the strength to say no to my dad. I didn't even know I was allowed to do that." I printed that message out and taped it inside my closet, because that's what this whole thing became. Bigger than me. The mortgage, the court case, the money, those were just the surface. What I really reclaimed was the right to define myself, not as the good daughter, not as the provider, but as a person with agency, limits, and value. And as the months passed, I realized something else. You don't always get the family you're born into, but you can choose the one you build. I now have chosen family. People who see me, not what I can do for them. Naomi, Elise, Uncle Victor, Dr. Martinez, Rachel from Portland, who now volunteers at a financial literacy nonprofit, and dozens of others in the Survivor Network. Brilliant, broken, healing people who said enough and meant it. Last week, we held our first in-person workshop, Financial Boundaries Aren't Betrayal. I stood at the front of a small room filled with strangers who somehow felt like home. I told them what I now know for sure. Protecting yourself is not selfish. Teaching people how to treat you is not cruelty. And sometimes, the most loving legacy you can leave is not what you give away, but what you refuse to let them take. I ended with one question. What would your life look like if you stopped apologizing for needing to be safe? There was silence. And then someone, some brave voice in the crowd, whispered, "Better." I smiled. So would mine. Have you ever had to protect yourself from your own family? Share your story in the comments below, because silence keeps us stuck, but sharing sets us free. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe, and stay with us for more true stories of resilience, boundaries, and becoming your own person, no matter what anyone else expects of you. Thank you for listening. You are not alone.